Previously on X-Men.
The podcast that looks back on X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. I'm Eric Mickles, known online as Dust vs. Tweak, and with me is my co-host,
Hilary Gunning.
And why did I skip all our normal introductions? That's because this is a very special episode in that at this date of recording, the first X-Men movie, X-Men 1, X-Men 2000, X-Men the movie, has turned 20 years old.
Happy birthday.
Oh my gosh.
to you.
No, wait, isn't that like owned? Can't you not sing that? Isn't that copyright?
Oh, that does sound like a thing.
Yeah. 20 years old. I tell you what, I thought this day was going to make me an emotional wreck when I realized, like, I'm 20! But I guess
weird.
Life is too strange right now to get hung up on how old a movie is.
If that's a thing that people do.
I mean, every now and then I'm like, wow, that's 20 years old. I remember seeing it. Like, I saw the first X-Men movie. We talked about this with Days of Future Past. When I saw the first X-Men movie, I was 14. And then 14 years later, Days of Future Past came out, and it was like a half a life lived.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was a crazy thing. So we have 2 episodes specifically for the X-Men movie, really 3 if you think about it, because we have our introduction episode where Hilary and I talked about how we were introduced to the X-Men and everything, and the movie played a big part for both of us in that. But we also did our X-Men 1 rewatch, which is unfortunately and a little surprisingly our shortest episode of the movies, not counting the Deadpool film.
I feel like I have so much more to say about that movie.
Yeah, it's only like an hour and 45 minutes or something. It's not a long episode. Considering we spent like 3 to 4 hours on both Days of Future Past and X-Men Origins.
We need to know when to shut up.
Yeah, I know. It was almost one of those things where it's like, should we redo the first movie? I mean, we could. We'd be fine. And in a way, we did, because we recorded the whole episode and then I didn't record it. So that's a fun little look back.
I forgot about that.
When we first did the first X-Men movie, and this is fairly early on in our show. Isn't this like our 3rd episode, the movie?
It was very, very
because we did our introduction, we did Giant Size, and then I think we did X-Men the movie.
I think you're right.
And we recorded, and we had recorded for a good hour or an hour and a half, and I realized I had not hit record. And like Hilary and I were like, we were feeling it. We were going back and forth. It was
a good episode.
We were live with that, with the stuff about the X-Men. We were loving talking about them and everything. And then I realized it, and it was basically I couldn't look at Hilary, and she had to leave. And it was so funny because you were even like, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. And it's just like, oh, I wanted to die. It was too early on in the show, and it was too important of an episode for me not to have wanted to just like disappear into the woods. So anyway,
but we did it again.
Yeah,
it was fine.
We met back up again to record it. All was forgiven, and the episode's fine. I still like the episode. So we did that. We talked about the first movie, and then we were super excited because we got to talk to David Hayter in a special interview.
Yeah,
and he was the screenwriter, kind of accidentally, we learned.
Yeah, that's a fun story. So listen to that episode to hear the fun story.
We talked to David Hayter about writing the first X-Men movie and all that, and then also the second movie. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a great interview.
Great chat.
And one of those episodes that at the same time, like if I had told me at 14, like, hey, you're going to talk to the guy who helped write this movie and is the voice of Solid Snake, I would have been like, you're a liar. I don't know who you are, mister, but you're a liar.
Hey, is now the time that we should bring up the thing about Scorpion King?
He wrote Scorpion King. And we forgot to ask him any Scorpion King questions because Nick, Hilary's husband, is a huge fan of Scorpion King, the movie.
Weirdly big fan, yeah.
A movie I watched on my own as a teenager, and at the end I was like, I don't like that.
No, yeah, that's the reasonable response.
Yeah. Hilary, 20 years on, how do you still feel about the first X-Men movie?
I really like it. I think it's still my favorite. Of
all the X-Men, woo, spoilers for whenever we finish these X-Men movies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that could change as I'm rewatching everything, but right now it just has a certain something to it.
Yeah.
That I like differently than I like other movies.
Yeah.
Like it's just more character driven, it's more quiet, which I always lean towards quieter movies, and it's more contained. I don't know. I just really like the style.
Yeah, I mean, the first movie, it's so good. And it's frustrating in this day of, like, the MCU and the DCU and everything. And I don't mean to take away anything for the MCU, because I still love these movies. But it does often feel like, as important as the first X-Men movie was, it kind of gets like left in the dust of our like memories. Online, it's always people talking about this stuff and like, oh, I can't wait till the X-Men get to be in the MCU and we get a cool X-Men movie. I'm like, shut up. The first X-Men movie is great.
Right, like as if we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Like now we get to see the X-Men.
I mean, I know there's ways to do the X-Men in movies that we haven't seen and do more like comic book accurate stuff. But like the first X-Men movie, not even just for its time, like watching it today, maybe it is because like comic book and superhero movies are so much bigger and everything. The X-Men movie does in some ways feel smarter and quieter because it is. And so like as
partly
much
because it had to be.
Yeah. But as much as I, love the Avengers movies and everything, X-Men is still unique because it is smaller and more character-driven and more focused. I mean, the whole Wolverine introduction in that cage fight, in the bar with his claws, it's just so good. And, like, seeing him for that first time with those claws is just so, I mean, it's so iconic. It just feels like they had a low budget and they weren't really sure of how they were going to be able to do all this big stuff. But like that one shot is just like, that's how you like introduce a character like that.
Well, that's something we talk about a lot in that rewatch episode.
And the interview,
how concisely they convey everything in that movie. It's just so tight and succinct.
It feels like it should be the blueprint for like other types of movies. Like if you were to make a Street Fighter movie today, it feels like you would look at the X-Men movie and how they introduced those characters. Just these like different characters and all over this place just slowly meeting together.
It's my jam.
It's still so good. The soundtrack is so weird and unique to like superhero movies, but also like the X-Men series in general. And it's so interesting because like as we've been watching the movies, they do get bigger. They get more characters. They take bolder stories from the comics. I mean, they do Days of Future Past and there's time travel in these X-Men movies, but like the first movie, there's no hint that any of that is going to happen.
Yeah.
Like watching that first X-Men movie and knowing that eventually they're going to travel in time. They're going to fight Apocalypse. They're going to make 2 Dark Phoenix movies. But like all of that, it's just like crazy to think about because it is so small. Yeah.
And I think it's cool because we've reached a point with like the MCU and everything where audiences are just willing to accept
you can do anything you want now.
That kind of craziness. Yeah. And at the time, that wasn't quite there yet. And so you have this realism that's sort of trying to get an audience to accept such an outrageous concept. But in hindsight, I still really enjoy that. I really enjoy that effort to make it feel real rather than just leaning into the outrageousness and just knowing that the audience is going to accept it.
I don't know if you can get to Iron Man's realism without X-Men.
Yeah.
Like the way that Iron Man is presented, like what if this was happening in the real world? Like Blade and X-Men were just like, all right, here's some weird concepts, but now it's in the real world. This is just down the street. And like, yeah, that is something that I don't know if the X-Men movies necessarily lose going forward because they always do try. It feels like they always consciously try to be like, we're the superhero movie that's in the real world. But maybe after the third movie, I think you do kind of lose. It starts to become a hyper reality a lot more than just like, man, this could be happening with like me and my friends. We could be like X-Men just like these guys.
Well, you get a lot of things nowadays on like Netflix and things that are kind of indie-ish movies that are really, really heavily like, this is real. This is the real world. And then something weird happens where somebody has magical powers or something. And those are those kind of quieter, meandering kinds of indie pieces that pop up a lot more visibly now, I guess, probably because of streaming services. And the first X-Men movie feels to me like it fits a lot better in that kind of a genre. Like it's not an indie piece. It's definitely a superhero movie, but it feels like it leans a little more in that direction than in the direction where we have like Thor and things falling out of the sky and all that craziness.
The superhero movie genre has moved past what the first X-Men movie was doing, but I don't think that takes away from the first X-Men movie at all. I think the first X-Men movie is still very good and one that I'm definitely, even when they introduced the new X-Men into the MCU, I'm still going back to the first X-Men. So
oh yeah, definitely.
It's sad. It's such a strange thing, but I got sad because I got on Disney Plus a couple days ago, and Days of Future Past was on it. And it's just so weird seeing this 20th Century Fox X-Men movie on Disney Plus. And it's the only one they have, but just seeing it there, like, we have Days of Future Past, I'm like, oh gosh, it's all just becoming one big...
It's all coming together.
Yeah. Always happy to talk about the first X-Men movie, but we just wanted to say, we love
Happy
you,
birthday.
X-Men 1. And as I told David Hayter, like, I don't know if I'd be doing this podcast movie. This podcast with you without that. I don't know if I would have been, like, running home to make sure I could watch the X-Men animated series on reruns in 2000 because of the movie, you know? I certainly wouldn't have I don't know if I'd be into comics. Who knows? Who knows? I was in a transitional stage. I could be a real big Harry Potter fan still. Yeah, that was fun. I don't know what our next episode is after this. I think we're talking the animated series. Or we're talking movies. Series. Just turn into any episode you like. We talk about different things.
Of them work.
Or bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bye.